Honestly, this episode just revealed what we've always truly been feeling deep down when we talk about artificial intelligence. We all just want to fuck it. Hello, interwebs! I hope you're all doing well, and welcome to my review of the third episode of Loki Season 2. This episode titled 1853, I believe was the number? Oh, 1893. I was off by 40 decades? 40 years. Time is irrelevant here. Anyways, I will do a spoiler-free review in just a moment, and then we will get into spoilers right after that. But just to let you all know before we get into the discussion of this episode, next week, I will not be releasing a review of both Loki and my normal Star Trek Lower Decks review because I am going to be filming my own movie next week. Literally starting on Sunday, I am going to be filming my own movie. It's going to be a really fun time, hopefully. This week has been very hectic. I'm actually shocked that I have enough energy to even film this review for all of you, but I still wanted to get it out because it's just fun for me. I enjoy doing this. But just be aware that you won't get any reviews or probably any videos on this channel next week just because I'm going to be way too busy to do anything else. So I'll be back in 2 weeks for reviews. But until then, I actually have a review of this episode to get to all to you first. So let's talk about this one, spoiler-free, like I said. First and foremost, what I liked most about this episode is it really feels like it captured an episodic feel for the show. Loki has been one of the more episodic feeling series of Marvel, even in its first season, but it still had this sort of more through-line feel to it throughout the entirety of its run until this episode, which really just felt like they were getting to do something that would tell a whole complete story within a singular episode, do a unique setting, this time in the 1800s Chicago, Illinois World Fair. That was a really, really good time. I just like that aesthetic and the idea of the show getting into a more episodic adventure single episode feel than sort of tying it into the more overarching narrative as we go. So on that level, I really, really enjoyed this. Moving on from that as well, this episode, and this isn't really a spoiler because it was featured in the end of the after credit sequence of Ant-Man, this episode featured the return of Jonathan Majors as a version of Kang. I have to be very careful because I don't want to praise Jonathan Majors the person because there's a lot of complicated things going on with that, but I will at least give him this, that his performance in this episode is really, really strong, and he does bring that sense of menace, yet in a very different way than the version of Kang that we saw at the end of Loki Season 1, He Who Remains. It was just a very varied performance that you still felt the core of this Kang character, both from Loki and Ant-Man, but had something a little bit different in it. So I really kind of enjoyed that, the Jonathan Majors of it all kind of aside. The thing that I didn't really like, and we'll get into this more into spoilers, is just the convoluted nature of everyone's motivations. They even make a point in this episode to sort of showcase how everyone still kind of has very similar motivations except for Sylvie, and yet they're not completely working together. And it's not entirely clear why. I get it, I can see, but it just, the motivations aren't as clear and as focused, and the goals of each of the characters aren't as specific enough as I would like to really make me feel the tension of all these different conflicts that we see going on. So as the series goes on, I really hope it focuses up and gets a little bit tighter, especially in terms of its character goals, because the characterization is great, but the character goals and what they're aiming for are a little bit nebulous, and it's leaving me to feel a little lost when it comes to some of the feeling of drive and tension from the plot itself. I'm enjoying the moment-to-moment storytelling and the characterization and the fun beats going on, but the overarching narrative is leaving me a little bit sort of waving in the breeze, I guess is the best way to put it. But to talk more specifically about that, let's get into spoilers. So we start off the episode with Renslayer and Miss Minutes, and I actually really liked this pairing of them until a point. I actually thought Miss Minutes and Ravonna sort of bouncing off of each other. It was a fun little partnership there. There's a little bit of tension between the two of them, but they were kind of on the same side, and then they kind of were sort of battling for the attentions of the Kang variant that we meet. The thing that bothered me and started to get, started to be is this really where we're going to be going with this, is that both Ravonna and Miss Minutes seem to be having attraction, romantic attraction, sexual attraction to Kang. I would actually say Miss Minutes is more of a romantic and Ravonna probably more sexual or like a power thing. And I'm just like, do we really need to put the two major women characters in a like, I want to fuck them or kill them sort of dynamic with Kang? It's just like, it really was just kind of frustrating to see the women characters, even if it is an AI women character, put in that position, especially Miss Minutes. Like, it was as soon as she's like, I could have been your girl. And I'm like, I don't know. I get the idea that they're going for of like, oh, he created an artificial intelligence. It's literally an objectified thing that he made for himself. So of course she's going to want to like fuck him because that's like how he would have programmed this female AI. But it just, I don't know. And I think that's an interesting story worth telling, but I don't think Loki as a series is really delving into that in a kind of a nuanced way, and it just comes across as like, yeah, it wanted to fuck him, and it didn't really have a lot of thought behind it. Ravonna's a little bit more interesting to me because I found like her attraction was less to him specifically and more to power. She just likes being in charge and likes being as close to power as she can get, and Kang certainly is a way to do that. And so while there is like a romantic attraction there, it's more her attraction to power that he represents. So that's a little bit more nuanced, but I think you could have done that story without it being a sort of like alluded to romantic sort of vibe between the two of them. That being said, I did like the sort of subtle storytelling of him saying like, I don't do partnerships, and that sort of coming back around with him abandoning Ravonna. Like, that clearly worked to me. And then Ravonna being like, I'm going to be in charge. Like, all of that dynamic I thought was solid. I just wish it didn't express itself in a sort of romantic / sexual sort of tension between all of the characters. Going on from that, I really liked this idea of this Kang variant being like having learned from his own self about the TVA and gotten these ideas from his own self, sort of creates that paradox of like, who created the idea if you give yourself the idea back in time? Like, where did the idea originally come from if you've constantly given it to yourself in a time loop? So I like that, and the idea that this variant sort of venerates Ouroboros. I'm curious to see how that's going to come back around in terms of Ouroboros' place within this story, because maybe he's more important than we sort of are thought to believe about him. That would sort of place him as an interesting position if he is the one who inspired He Who Remains. Yet He Who Remains is also the one who inspired Ouroboros and hired Ouroboros. So just very interesting sort of temporal loops that are potentially being set up here. Loki and Mobius are having are good in this episode. I don't think this is like the strongest showcase of their dynamic like we got last episode, but they certainly are having fun. I did enjoy them seeing like the Norse god statues and like be like, Thor's not that tall. I thought it was kind of fun, and like seeing the Marvelized version of like these Norse imagery, I thought was kind of fun to watch. But ultimately, it wasn't as fun as I've seen them be. But it was even this season. But it was by no means a bad time. I always enjoy them. I also think another weak link here is Sylvie. I was a bit confused why Sylvie was even here, because we saw her at the end of last episode. She seemed fairly content to stay out of it. She's like, I'm gonna go back to work at McDonald's and not bother doing anything. And I get like she's like wants to go after any variants of Kang so she can sort of preserve that for herself. But it just feels weird that she's even aware of this going on, especially coming off of last episode where she literally said, I don't want anything to do with this. So it just feels like there was a missing piece in that character development where she's like, I just want to sit back and do nothing, to like, I'm going to take an active involvement in preserving that. Like, I felt like there needed to be some level of connection there that I just didn't get, and ultimately just left me a little bit confused why she was here. And that kind of goes to my problem overall with this, which is motivations. Because the episode even makes a point to say, you know, like Renslayer and Miss Minutes kind of want to do the same thing that Loki and Mobius do, which is preserve the TVA. And the difference and the distinction would be that Renslayer wants to be the one in charge and actually sort of keep the TVA the way it was, versus Mobius and and Loki wanted to, change the TVA a little bit, reform it, as it were. And I disagree with both of them. I'm very much on the Sylvie side. Let's be able to hold on to our free will. Screw big organizations that act as police and tell us how to do things, whether or not we try to get rid of the few bad apples or not. You can see my politics. Sorry. But that being said, I just feel like those distinct motivations are there, but it's not entirely as distinct to me. And you can kind of glean it through the characterization. I feel like there needs to be a little bit more clarity on that, just to give us a good distinction about why they aren't entirely working together. Maybe it's just me. Maybe my brain just needs them to be a little bit clear, and the episode does try to do that, but it just still feels a little bit nebulous to me. It would just like a little bit more clarity, and especially on Sylvie, because Sylvie's motivations just feel, I can see how they got there, but there just seems to be stuff missing. And I think that has been kind of a recurring criticism of this season so far, is that there just feels like there's beats missing here. There was a beat that was missing between episodes 1 and 2. There feels like a couple character beats missing between episodes 2 and 3 here. And my wonder is, like, maybe they did write those scenes. Maybe they did write those sequences, but because they're narrowed down to 6-minute episodes, they weren't able to do that. And so they just sort of like cut them out and hoped that we would connect the dots in between. And there's something economical to say about that, but I still feel like we should have seen just maybe a little bit more stuff. And so I do wonder if there's perhaps production or financial reasons for that. I'd be curious, to be frank. But that's generally my thoughts on this episode of Loki Season 2, Episode 3. What did you think of it? I'd love to hear all your thoughts down below. Again, reminder, I will not be reviewing Lower Decks or Loki next week, but I will be back in 2 weeks to review. I'll probably do the 2 Lower Decks episodes, the finale and the 1 episode that next week separately, but the Loki reviews, I'll probably review episodes 4 and 5 in one video next week, or 2 weeks from now, I should say. So I hope you all have a good 2 weeks without me. Don't forget me. I love you all. Please, I need you. And I'll see you all in 2 weeks on the other side of production. In 2 weeks I will have hopefully at least done production on my own movie, which is kind of wild. So wish me luck, and I hope you all live long and prosper.